Hi, everyone. I am sorry to interrupt your lunch, but I want to give a few words on behalf of Provost San Miguel. She wasn't able to be here today, and it's a privilege to share some remarks on her behalf. I don't know if you can hear a lot of echo. Let me see. There. So today's marks the conclusion of the 29th Annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference. This conference has provided a dynamic platform for exploring the ever-evolving landscapes of business, education, sustainability, public policy, and beyond. From doctoral candidates and undergraduate students to faculty and international scholars, each presenter contributed a critical perspective to the broader mosaic of this year's theme, one grounded in hemispheric insight and global relevance. Yesterday's sessions showcase a strong emphasis on international business, where doctoral students examine the influence of leadership traits, political risk, and entrepreneurial behavior and orientation on firm behavior. These thought-provoking presentations were followed by engaging panels on finance, innovation, and entrepreneurship, which delved into topics such as central bank transparency, debt costs, and the role of marketing alliances in advancing innovation. Spanish language sessions provided deep regional perspectives addressing topics such as the transformative impact of AI in education, productivity within maquiladoras, and the cultural underpinnings of economic behavior across northern Mexico. These bilingual sessions brought an added depth and cultural resonance that is vital to meaningful dialogue. This year's program also examined critical intersections of leadership, trade, and transportation, exploring how trade openness enhances international tourism and how employment shifts in supply chains are reshaping North American economic integration. Today, we witness timely and pressing issues, including public service performance, climate and trade policy, gender equity in the workplace, which, by the way, was a Teams panel this morning I attended, which was great, and frameworks for citizenship security in emerging economies. Our presenters not only highlighted challenges, but also offered innovative models, practical solutions, and visions for sustainable progress. Notably, our discussions on corruption and sustainable development pushed us to reflect on governance, not merely as an institutional matter, but as a moral imperative. In a few moments, we will hear from our keynote speaker, who will present on the financial economics of spaceflight, a fitting conclusion to a conference defined by bold ideas and expansive thinking. On behalf of Interim President Castillo, Provost San Miguel, and myself, we thank you for being here today and for your continued support of the annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference. Thank you. And now Dr. Perez will announce our speaker.
Good afternoon, distinguished attendees. It is my distinct honor to introduce today's featured speaker, Professor William Bill Megginson, a scholar of international renown and one of the most foremost authorities on international finance, state-owned enterprises, and privatization. Dr. Megginson holds the prestigious Price Chair in Finance at the University of Oklahoma, and his research has profoundly shaped how scholars, governments, and global institutions understand the evolving role of the state in capital markets. His work has been published in the most respected journals in our field, widely cited, highly influential, not only in academia, but also in public policy. But beyond the accolades and influence, Professor Megginson's presence here today is also a story of connection and collaboration, the kind that fuels academic discovery and long-term professional growth. For you see, A couple of decades ago, he co-edited a special issue on bank privatization in the Journal of Banking and Finance with our very own Dr. George Clark, director of the Center for the Study of Western Hemispheric Trade. And more recently, his name came onto our radar thanks to another top mind in corporate finance and governance, a professor I had the privilege of learning from at the turn of the century, about 25 years ago. I share these two brief accounts not just as a personal footnote, but as a gentle reminder, especially for some students in the room, that our academic and professional lives are often woven together by relationships, conversations, and shared curiosity. Whether it's a professional collaboration, a classroom encounter, or a recommendation from a mentor 2 decades later, every connection holds the potential to open a new door. That too is the spirit of this conference and what makes Professor Megginson's presence here with us today all the more meaningful. Before we call him to the stage, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to the sponsors of the Sanchez School of Business Academy, Banking Academy, Texas Community Bank, the Rio South Texas Education and Community Development Foundation, PNC, IBC Bank, Commerce Bank, and Falcon Bank. Your support allows us to develop future generations of financial leaders in South Texas and beyond, and make this kind of engagement possible. We're deeply grateful for your partnership and thought leadership. So now, please join me in offering a warm welcome to Professor William Bill Megginson, a scholar whose work, insight, and generosity of spirit truly exemplifies the values we celebrate here at the Western Hemispheric Trade Conference.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luis. Am I on? Is the mic working? Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I actually, two days ago, I was a keynote speaker at a conference in Kuwait, so it's been a long, strange trip to be here, but it's wonderful to be here. I'll be talking today about the financial economics of spaceflight. As Louise mentioned, a question naturally comes up: what is a nice corporate finance professor doing researching spaceflight? It's one of those things that's strange. We get by in strange things. I was teaching venture capital and private equity. I'm a finance professor, and it turns out that the University of Oklahoma has a very large aerospace and defense MBA program. Tinker Air Force Base is there, and they wanted to do something in finance, space finance. So, how hard could it be, right? It's venture capital. It turned out it was a lot harder than it was supposed to be. But just to introduce, I'm the Price Chair of Finance. My day job is the University of Oklahoma as the Price Chair of Finance. I'm also a visiting professor at a university in Beijing. And by some strange turn of events, I'm a finance area editor at the Journal of International Business Studies. And again, I'll be talking tonight. And by the way, I understand that a certain group needs to leave at a certain time to go back to across the border. So I won't take it personally if a large section of the audience gets up and leaves. So I'll understand. Okay, so what we'll talk about for spaceflight is I'll define what the global space economy is and how important launch is. Again, coming at this from start, I thought there would be an established body of industrial organization, the financial economics of space. Turns out there was none of that. There's a huge body of literature on the engineering of space, the geophysics of space, actually the financial returns of space, but nothing that you would point to this is what the space industry is as a financial industry. So I kind of had to define it. And since, as Louise mentioned, much of my research for the last 20, 30 years has been on the intersection of business and government, private versus public ownership, privatization, I kind of naturally looked at the space industry and tried to classify it along an entrepreneurial spectrum. Right? And most of us think about space, NASA naturally comes to mind. We think that it's overwhelmingly government sponsored. Well, one of the things I'll probably say several times, 3/4 of the space industry is private. Only 1/4 of it is actually directly tied to government spending. So it's overwhelmingly private. Overwhelmingly satellites is by far the biggest. and I won't do it, but my temptation is, what do you think the most important business that has come out of space is? Well, I'll leave it hanging for a second. GPS. Uber is the biggest space company. Well, yeah, in terms of value, SpaceX is the biggest, but in terms of the businesses that have formed from it, it's going to be GPS. They are permeating our lives, right? Most of us use GPS to get here today. All of us have cell phones which have, since 2008, Apple has had GPS built into it. Uber, Airbnb, all of the DoorDash, all of the deliveries that are based on GPS all came from a military satellite. So there have been derivatives of this. So basically what I'll do, and if I don't get to it, let me do it now. I kind of defined 4 basic sectors of the space economy. One is pure science and exploration. This is government. This is what NASA was formed to do, to explore the cosmos and essentially just basically do good science, space science. There's a military sector, which is incredibly important, growing very rapidly. Again, also almost purely government. The last 2, from an economic point of view, are really kind of the most interesting. Human space exploration. We are going back to the moon, and we're going to Mars. Whether we think it's a good idea or not, it's going to happen. And this is where most of the action is. And then there's the enormous commercial sector, which think of it mostly as going to be satellites. I'll briefly describe what passes for space law, and then talk about, you probably never wanted to know about what the different Earth orbits are. It turns out it's very important, and all of it is driven by economics and physics. The choice between LEO is low Earth orbit, geosynchronous orbit, geostationary orbit. Well, I'll mention all of these. And then I'll describe the financial economics of the space industry, which are very strange. Those of us who were, I know there's several bankers in the audience, many logistics people, probably several people involved with manufacturing. I was a petroleum chemist in an earlier life. This is a weird looking industry from a financial point of view. Those of you who are bankers, this is not going to look like any other industry that you've had to fool with. So, but again, it's hopefully I'll get it that it's very important. Okay, so what do we find? It's relatively small. For all of the press that it gets, the space economy is $600 billion, give or take, 10 or 20 billion. Now, the world economy is over 100 trillion. So it's barely 0.5% of the global economy. It's growing very fast, but it's still, in a macroeconomic sense, fairly small. 3/4 of it is private, in private hands, goes to private sector, driven overwhelmingly now by private sector initiative. Mostly SpaceX, but not exclusively. The industry has been supercharged, and I don't use that term lightly, by declining launch cost. Now, I'll say it again later, but let me just to put this in your head in terms of the transportation. Laredo is hugely successful, and it depends on transportation between the U.S. and Mexico. But think about the impact of declining transportation cost. Just to take it from, you go from horses to rail to cars, automotive. You go from sail to steam ships. It has now had this type of impact on transportation cost that you had in those instances. Pretty numbers. Up until about 2011, when the space shuttle ended, for 30 years, the average cost to send a payload of a kilogram of payload to space was about $18,500. Now with Falcon Heavy, it's about $1,400. When Starship fully gets online, it will be $200. 18,000 to 200. Complete expansion, massive expansion of the capacity, the reduction of the cost. We know what this does from economics. When you have that decline in cost and increased capacity, all kinds of things become possible. Okay, so that's where we're headed. I'll go ahead and get started here. So what is the space economy, the global space economy? What is it? How big is it? What are the different sectors? Well, it turns out, I don't mean to expect you to notice all these, but some of the key points. Well, this didn't work. The top two are the ones that are important. Commercial infrastructure and support, this is launch. Yeah, this is the rockets that go up. This is what SpaceX, Blue Origin, others do. 124 billion. The commercial space products and services, GPS, the satellite sending down the images of Earth, satellite communications, satellite radio, 320 billion. Those two together out of 570 billion, that's 78%. So 78% by these numbers of the global space economy is going to be commercial. The next one, by far the biggest space government, space government is the US. So of the 120 billion total spending by governments, 74 billion of that, well over half, 60%, almost 2/3, is US, of which the Department of Defense, including the reconnaissance, is by far the biggest. It's a huge chunk of the space budget we don't really see, but is reconnaissance and communications. Okay, China is the next, but it's again, to take out of this, most of it is private. Of the government spending around the world, 2/3 of it's US, and over half of that is military. So this is kind of the background of what the space economy is. The capital, because it's been invested. As we'll see later on, this has not been a profitable business by and large to be in. Unless you happen to back GPS or you were an early investor in SpaceX, a lot of folks have lost money in this, but it still keeps attracting a tremendous amount of capital. 20 billion recent years to 30 billion recent years. Where does it go? Half of it comes in the US. Half of the investment, total 340 billion since 2009 into over 2,000 companies. Half of it into the US, 25% into China, and then everybody else. China and the US, this is a two-country race, and has been and will continue to be going forward. By industry, satellites. So this is, just to put it in perspective, the space economy is not what most of us think it is. Most of us think it's the rockets going up and down. That's a very small but critical part. Overwhelmingly, it's the stuff up there going around all the time, the satellites. Okay, so the launch industry, just so you probably would know this, those on the left, that's the US model where the Starship is the one on the far right. The one in the middle is China, and the one on the right is Russia. So the launch industry, there were a lot of numbers here, so let me get the most important ones. There were 261 launches last year. We're on track for maybe 300 this year. 2 years ago, it was less than 100. So this launch industry is growing faster than Moore's Law for semiconductors. It's literally exponential, the growth. Only 5 countries had it more than 4 launches: US, China, Russia, Japan, and India. Europe, unfortunately, has fallen and can't seem to get up. One of the things that's interesting, we know this, but we don't think about it in terms. Last year saw by far the largest launch of military rockets in history. You had, with Israel, Iran's attack on Israel, 300 ballistic missiles fired at Israel. None of them got through. So you've had a lot of the firsts. You had the first Starship. We all watched that. We all watched the Starship come down and be caught by the Megginson arms. This is just unbelievable. But now you've also had Blue Origin has finally flown for the first time. Okay, this is what the cost of spaceflight. It's not too easy to see, but I can talk it through it. On the top row there, you can see for several years, from 1980, 1960 to 70, basically it was really expensive to spend anything to space. $18,000 to $20,000 per kilogram to send things to space for 30 years. Only governments did this. It was that expensive. Then along came SpaceX, and they had their first successful flight in 2006. They had the first service of the Space Shuttle, International Space Station in 2012, and then you can see Falcon 1, Falcon Heavy, Falcon 9, Starship, steady decline in launch cost, massive decline in launch cost, heading towards, again, maybe $200 or $300 per kilo. This is transformative. we all know, again, I did not start this. I did not want to become a Elon Musk fanboy. That was just not my intention at all. But when you look at what SpaceX has done, it's kind of hard not to. They transformed the industry. One of the most important things, and easy to understand, before SpaceX, every rocket that was launched was thrown away. Right? Put a payload up, did whatever the payload did, and then the rocket itself that took it up just kind of fell back through the atmosphere and went into the water and went away. It's like building a 747 to fly from Dallas to London, throwing it away, build another one to come back. So reusability is kind of obvious, but technically very difficult to do. Only one company has so far done it. Only SpaceX has done it. The other things, eliminate as many parts as you possibly can. But the third, in long term, this may be almost as important as what's happening in space, is the impact that SpaceX and also the Tesla will have on manufacturing. Again, I have a manufacturing background. I worked for 5 years in heavy industry. The idea always, and as an economist for the last 40, 50 years, the idea is you don't want to become vertically integrated. You basically do what you're relatively good at and contract with other specialist providers for other things. No, Tesla's not done that. It's not quite you bring in the stainless steel and a rocket comes out, but it's pretty close. They have vertically integrated their manufacturing process to a degree that's almost unimaginable and designed in manufacturability to the entire process. They plan to create 1,000 Starships, the big rockets that they're sending up now. They're producing a rocket engine a day. When they get online with Starship, they'll produce at least one a week, probably up to 3 a week. This is manufacturing of heavy, big stuff on a scale we haven't seen probably since World War II. Okay, so a lot of things are going into it. This is China. All of China's rockets are called Long March, after the Long March of the Communist Party in the 1930s to escape the nationalists. So they're all Long March. They're all, so far, not reusable, expendable rockets. Most of them, this is getting kind of into weeds, but bear with me if you would, please. You can basically now have two types of rocket propellants. You could have something that burns kerosene and oxygen, or now it's going to be methane and oxygen, so a combustion engine, right? That's what all the European, Starship, all the others are combustion engines. Chinese rockets traditionally have been what are called hypergolic. You have two chemicals that when you put them together react very violently with a great deal of thrust. It can work. All of the maneuvering rockets that you see in space, when the Dragon capsule comes up to the International Space Station, it has to make fine corrections. Those are hypergolic. But for the main thrust, most of theirs have been chemical reactions. Not burning, but chemical reactions. Okay, so China's coming on very strong. This Russia is again, I was born 3 years before Sputnik in 1957, October 57. That's the start of the space age. Before that, the only rockets had been V-2s in World War II. So for 1957, started the space age. That particular rocket is a derivative of what put up Sputnik. That rocket, going back to the original, has flown 2,700 times. So it's the most active rocket. It's both a blessing and a curse. It's reliable, but it's 60, 70 years old, right? So the Russians have really kind of fallen, and it's hard to see them catching up. The other one that's really surprisingly has done very poorly and is struggling to catch up is Europe. An early leader, but for a variety of reasons, they only had 3 launches last year. All of them, even their newest rocket, the Ariane 6, is expendable. So because of the tensions, the geopolitical tensions we all know about that are coming out, Europe's having to make a push to become more self-reliant on launch, more self-reliant on getting away from Starlink, the communication satellite. So a lot of politics drive this as well as the economics. Okay, space law. How often do we think of space law? Well, you don't need to think of it very often because there's not a lot of it. There's only one treaty that's universally agreed, and that's the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. I'll briefly mention how we came to it a little bit later. But this basically, after many trials in the 1960s and near misses with nuclear war, bad things happening, 1967, Britain, the US, and Russia signed the Outer Space Treaty, and it's now been ratified by over 100 countries. This is the universal treaty of space. Did two things. First, it said no country or company can claim anything in outer space, any territory. You can't claim part of the moon, you can't claim an asteroid, you can't claim a pathway. So you can't claim territory in space. Second, you can't nuclearize it. You can't put weapons of mass destruction, which then meant nuclear weapons. You can militarize it. As I'll show, space has been militarized from the very beginning. But those two things are binding. Now, that sounds very clear-cut, but resources. Think about the ocean. Nobody can own the ocean, any part of the ocean, except for right around their coast. But if you find fish or oil or minerals in the ocean, you can extract that. So the question that is still kind of unsettled in international law is, what if you find resources on the moon? Can you extract that? Can that be private property? Well, international law is unsettled. US law now has come in and said, yeah, with the Artemis Treaty and other treaties, if you go to the moon and you find materials there, you can keep the materials. You can't claim space, but you can extract the materials. This Artemis Treaty, it's not actually a treaty, the accords signed by originally 8 countries, now up to 53, and brief digression, when I taught this course last year, I agreed to do it partly because the first of the 2 courses that were taught was by Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator under Trump 1. So, learning from kind of the best there. And he was the one who came up with Artemis, the Artemis Accords. Artemis is the sister of Zeus in mythology and the goddess of the hunt. But they have now 53 signatories. This is the working law for the West. US, Europe, Japan is covered by the Artemis. Russia and China are playing by different rules. Okay, the sectors of the space economy, science, it's been very important. This is the James Webb Space Telescope, launched 4 years ago, a masterpiece of engineering, peering out in 500 billion years, 500 million years, light years in the past, so a work of absolute magic. Many other types of science that NASA does is very important. NASA was started in 1958 as a civilian agency. So what? Well, it wasn't obvious that it was going to be civilian, but it is. Most of the Western agencies, space agencies are civilian. China is basically military. Many really incredible and important space projects. For those of us who are financial economists, though, it's kind of uninteresting, right? It's government, pure government. It's going to be done because of the politics of science. All right, the military sector, also pure government, or almost pure government, since World War II, we don't think about this, but beginning from World War II on, the US was one of the first countries where you basically had private companies make the weapons, the ships and the tanks and the guns. Before that, it was all done by national governments. Well, since then, most of the military kit in the world is privately made under government contract, and that's still the case in space. Okay, briefly in space, militaries, there have been, 1,000 or so years ago, some unknown Chinese chemists came up with gunpowder. And before too long, being humans, they figured out a way to use it in combat. So the first battle that actually used it was in 1232. It was used for many centuries after that. Those of us who have grown up singing the Star-Spangled Banner, that was rockets, British Congreve rockets fired at Fort McHenry. So this has been used a long time. It went out of favor. Rockets went out of favor from then until the V2 in World War II in favor of much more precise cannons and other types of weaponry. It has come back. Now, it turns out, what's the only country that has exploded a large nuclear weapon in space? US, right? Turns out Russia did smaller ones, but the US had the 1.2 megaton bomb Star Prime test, right? 500 times bigger than the Hiroshima bomb. Let's put it up 300 miles in orbit, explode it, and see what happens. And it was devastating. Knocked out a third of all the satellites, wreaked havoc on all of what we know about the electromagnetic pulse came from this. And basically, this was a really bad idea. If you remember the movie 13 Days, there was an issue right during the Cuban Missile Crisis where President Kennedy was informed, by the way, we did a nuclear weapon test in space. That was the one, right? So it quickly became, this is a bad idea. You had the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty about basically you could test nuclear weapons. You had to do it underground. You couldn't do it above, on ground. So that limited nuclear weapons. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis. It became clear you needed to keep some kind of control over nuclear weapons. And then by 1967, they had the Outer Space Treaty. Okay, fast forward though, the military, 1978, the military launched GPS, Global Positioning System, satellites. As a little bit later I'll show, there's 24 satellites in low Earth orbit, no, the geosynchronous orbit, low Earth orbit, and they all send out basically radio signals. And any four of them, if you have the radio signals intersecting from four of these satellites, you know precisely to a meter where you are anywhere on Earth, above Earth, on Earth, below ground. So this is incredibly precise. Turned out last year they figured out it also works on the moon. GPS actually works on the moon. But it turns out, now the Air Force actually at the time didn't want this. But then they found out during the Gulf War in 1991 how important, incredibly important it was. Brief digression, what this happened, the first use of this, some of us in this room are of the age where we remember Korean Airlines Flight 007. Right? It was a flight from the US to Korea over the Pacific before GPS, and it's straight off course. Straight over the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, and the Soviets shot it down. Killed 250 people. Okay, after that, because of a navigation error, President Reagan opened up first GPS to commercial aviation, and then very soon to everybody. And it turned out this has been by far the most successful business application. From a military point of view, it was transformational. During the first Gulf War, showed its potential, and of course showed it to us, allies, and adversaries. Became clear this is something you must have. Okay, so the military, by 2019, we, the United States, launched our 6th military force, 6th armed service, the Space Force. Almost unanimous vote in Congress. Not quite, but almost unanimous. Okay. The most important, really kind of from the business point of view, of the militarization of space, a lot of activities going here, a lot of innovation, a lot of money is going into the military side of space. But one of the things that's very important is beginning in 1985 with the US, they shot one down. A satellite, an old defunct satellite, the US, fired a missile from an airplane and destroyed it. Turns out it's not that hard to do. But they didn't think this all the way through, or maybe they didn't care. You hit something, a big satellite with another big piece of machinery going 17,000 miles an hour in the vacuum of space, bad things happen. You have a debris field, right? You did. 2007, China did by far the most environmentally damaging anti-satellite test. 5 countries have done this. 5 countries, China, US, Russia, India, I guess is the 4th, have done anti-satellite tests, destroyed satellites in space. The problem is you create a lot of debris. So how much debris? Well, this is the number of items, space junk, identifiable space junk in space, in low Earth orbit. It's up there. It's not going anywhere. It's just going round and round like everything else. It's now 15,000. It's 25,000 pieces of identifiable space junk, at least 4 inches square. And you can see each one of the lines there are immediately after an anti-satellite missile test. So this has contributed to the number of junk pieces of space junk, but it's other things. It's defunct satellites, things that fall off satellites. A bolt, think of a bolt going 17,000 miles an hour, hitting something is going to have a huge impact. So theoretically, at least, this could be a major, major problem in space. Not yet, but it could be. Okay, science, space, human exploration. The International Space Station, we've all heard about it. Most of us really haven't given it much thought. That's a pretty big deal. Okay, the International Space Station was started in the 1980s, but actually began operating in the 1990s, passed Congress by one vote. It was with Russia. This was the time when we were really getting along very well with Russia. Russia's a foundational partner in the International Space Station, still is, right? So they have the foundational element. They provide the propulsion, vital part of it. Okay, so the space shuttle has been up there since 1998, since 1993, 98 is when they actually launched the first module, became operational 2001 with people, and it's been operating ever since. So this is except for China, all of the astronauts or cosmonauts in space are on the International Space Station. It was supposed to come down in 2024. It was supposed to be its life. They had to extend it, right? So it now will come down probably 2030, and there's supposed to be replacements that are going to be private sector replacements. We'll see. This is really one of the open questions. Will you actually see private space shuttle stations come into being? Okay, the Chinese also have their own space station now. Let's see, I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, you have, NASA does not want to operate a national government space station, so there's 3 major bidders to set up private space stations. We'll see. I mean, it could happen. At this stage, I'd probably bet about $1 that they won't do it, but it could very well happen. And India, Russia, other countries have proposed it. Okay, the other part of space, human space exploration, is going to the moon and Mars. Why? It's not at all clear, but we're going there. So why exactly do we want to go to the moon or Mars? Okay, think that through. What possible reason do we have to go to the moon or Mars? There's no market there. There are no Martians just with money that they're trying to buy our stuff. There's no resources there that cannot be created much cheaper on Earth. It's really expensive. It's a wretched place. By the way, the moon is a barren rock, 1/25 trillionth the atmosphere of Earth, and it's temperature variation minus 208 to plus 40 degrees. The lowest was 4. Absolute zero is 460. So it's so cold, you're almost stopping molecular motion, atomic motion. 14 days, 14 nights. The stuff that's on the ground is called regolith, and it's electrostatically charged. You have tremendous radiation from the sun. It's not blocked. Why in the world do we want to go there? We do. We're going. It's partly because billionaires are paying for it. We have 2 very, very rich American entrepreneurs, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Branson, is kind of faded now, but they want to go there. I mean, Elon Musk has been quoted as saying that he wants to die on Mars, not on impact. So basically, he wants to get there, live for a while, it'll obviously probably be named after him. So, and then, die on Mars. It's not at all clear we would do this if we were paying for it, if we taxpayers were paying. We're going to the moon first, we're going to Mars eventually. Moon first, once you get there, what do? Right? You're going to have to build some kind of habitation. It's going to have to be energy, which is going to be nuclear. There's no other alternative. Everything you need is going to have to be mined there. You can't supply the moon from Mars, from the Earth. So we're going whether it makes sense or not. And that's the easy one. Mars is even worse. It's 140 million miles away on average. Now, what do we mean by on average? I get excited, so if I fall off, don't worry, I'll be okay. The Earth, Sun is here, the Earth goes around this way, Mars does this. And the only time that Mars and Earth are at all close is when, it's once every 2 years, they're within easy travel distance, 6 months each way in space. Now, it's going to be very hard to get there unless you, somehow repeal the laws of physics or come up with light-speed aircraft. It takes 6 months. When you get there, that's what you have. By the way, that is the landing field is called Wright Brothers Field. There's a Wright Brothers Field on Mars, and that's where a lot of the stuff lands. So we're headed to Mars, whether there's a good reason or not. Okay, commercial space sector. I've got a lot to cover, so I'm going through it pretty fast. It's basically satellites. What are satellites? Well, we kind of all think we know or have the idea, but the first ones were these big, huge, multi-billion-dollar things, mostly military or government, put up into either low Earth orbit or, if I say geostationary orbit, that means satellite 22,600 miles above a spot on Earth. And the idea to think about Turner Broadcasting out of Atlanta would have a satellite, 22,600 miles up, and it goes with that. So it circles, does a complete circumnavigation of the Earth in 23 hours and 56 minutes. So it stays at one point all the time, which is very handy, right? You only have to have one ground station for TBS to communicate with a satellite. That satellite can cover a very wide area. Theoretically, 3 satellites, you can cover the world from 23,000 miles up. Okay, so the original satellites that were there were very big, very expensive, commercial and military. Now, over time, it's gotten steadily smaller. So now, even as launch costs have come down, satellites have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. There are less than a dozen big geosynchronous satellites built a year now. There's several thousand small ones. So it's gotten to where you have CubeSats, which again is 4 inches square, with all of the computerized stuff that actually do good science in something the size of a shoebox. Those are the CubeSats. Okay, these are you probably never knew, you wanted to know the 5 orbits of the Earth, but turns out if you get very deep into space at all, you kind of need to. So on the left there, you can see the black circle very close to Earth. That's a low Earth orbit. Think 200 to 500 miles above the Earth, circulating in one spot. So they're going, again, 17,000 miles an hour, circumnavigates the Earth in 90 minutes. So if you're going to cover all of the Earth, Starlink, you're going to need 42,000 of them. They now have about 8,000 Starlink satellites. The problem is they're very handy. They're, just in space terms, just a few miles up. But if you think about it, if you're going to do a Starlink receiver for telecommunications, you have that for about an hour. It's going to be going across so you have to have to be able to communicate with a satellite for about an hour and then pick up another one, right? So you need a lot of satellites, constellation of satellites, to provide universal service, even to one country. If you want to provide it for the Earth, as Starlink is doing, it's going to be 42,000. That's what they're aiming for now. So that's low Earth orbit. There's 2 types of geosynchronous orbit, or geostationary orbit. The one I just mentioned is geostationary, on one point in space, going around at the equator, that follows a single point. You can communicate with that directly all the time. So you have geostationary. You also have geosynchronous. In other words, pole to pole, going pole to pole. Why would you do that? A lot of what you want to do with satellites is observe the Earth for weather, for pollution, for tracking ships, tracking airplanes. A lot of stuff is geointelligence. Look at the Earth. That's very handy if you do it pole to pole. Okay, that's GEO is geosynchronous, GSO is geostationary. You have medium Earth orbit. The one that's GSO, that's kind of interesting. It looks like it's tilted. But think of the Earth is actually tilted. The Earth is 35 degrees. It's not due north, it's 35 degrees. So the GSO there is basically pole to pole. Now, the last one, the one that's interesting, is on the right here, high Earth orbit. This is basically Russian. Why? Okay, it's called Molniya. This is basically, comes very close to Earth at its apogee, at its perigee. It's very far out in space, all right? So you have that. Why? Think about that. From the northern hemisphere, you have access to that satellite 2/3 of the day. It's always where you can see it 2/3 of the day. So it's a very efficient orbit for Russia, Canada to a lesser degree. Okay, very briefly, this is it's hard to get up to date. Basically, there's about 10,000 satellites, active satellites in space now. Most of them are US. At the bottom here, about 2/3 of those are the US. Almost 7,000 of them are Starlink alone, just SpaceX. Most of them are for communications, 2/3 are for communications, and now almost 90%, headed to 90%, are in low Earth orbit. Okay? Why? This is getting in the weeds, I'll go through it quickly. Even at the speed of light, something 23,000 miles up in space, to send a signal there and back takes almost a minute, 0.6, not a minute, almost a second, 0.6 seconds. So what? Well, for certain, if you're doing video games, which I never knew it, it's a very big thing in space, a very important part of space, that's called latency. People don't want to wait 0.6 seconds. If you've ever had an international phone call going through space, you know, there's a delay. So this is one of the critical problems with geostationary orbits, is there's latency. It takes, think about, over a half a second to get a signal back and forth. Low Earth orbit's instantaneous. You don't notice it at all. So you have very low latency, okay? It's very cheap to launch. You only have to put it up 200 miles rather than 23,000 miles. So there's real benefits to doing it. The problem is, to cover a large area, you need several thousand. So it's all driven by economics. You have the low latency, but you also have to have several thousands satellites to do it. High Earth orbit, geosynchronous orbit, you have one, you only have to launch it once, but very high capital cost, both on the ground and in space. So the choice is driven by economics, and low Earth orbit is winning. Vast majority of satellites are going to low Earth orbit. This is a couple of years old, but the basic pattern says you only have 2 established satellite constellations. Starlink is by far the biggest, 7,000 operating. Then you have OneWeb, European, about 600. That's it. China's going to put up to, I think, 6,000 initially, 15,000 within a few years, but they're not up yet. Okay, military satellites. We talked briefly about GPS. You can see there that in the middle. You only need 24. There's 8 special or spare. So there's 32 now. They're sending up GPS 3. It's just now starting. But with that, you can basically know where you are anywhere in the world to within a meter. So it's incredibly important. Because it's so important, China has its own system, Russia has its own system, even India has its own system, Japan, and Europe. So people know the importance, don't want to rely on the US. This was even before the recent spat. So you have other countries that are building their own. By far the most important has been, commercially, has been GPS. We don't think of Uber, Tinder, Garmin, all these as space companies, GPS companies, but of course they are. They all would not exist without GPS. I think I may have the numbers. I took it out for space. But basically, the GPS companies that have gone public, they've raised about $170 billion in their IPOs. The early investors in these companies got a 700 times return. Okay? Now, this is very uncommon. We'll see venture capital, this is where it usually goes to die. But in GPS, this has been by far the most successful financially. Military satellites, We don't know, but they're incredibly important, and the capabilities are absolutely amazing. Just briefly, I don't have a slide, but I'm teaching this, so I have this in class. The Hubble Space Telescope, which went up in 1990, we all know what it kind of looks like. It's up there 350 miles out, and it's looking 500 million light years into space. And it has the optics to do that. Well, probably the KH-12 US military satellite is essentially the Hubble telescope pointed down. So, you can see 500 million light years into space. Think of what you can see looking 500 miles down. What you can see is this. This was the only time that a KH-12 image has been released by President Trump in 2019, but it's a 2017 event. 2017, the Iranians tried to launch a missile, for a satellite missile, and it blew up on the pad there. And then, of course, they blamed the US. Well, President Trump released this this Keyhole-12 image, and look at that. On the bottom here, that's writing. There's not a person in here. If there was, you could see if they were raising their right hand or the left hand. You can see the steps. This is from 500 miles up. And this is a photo of a photo. You can see by the flash. So this is the kind of resolution that we know about. This was 8 years ago. So you can imagine what it is now. So if we went outside and held up our hand, they could tell which finger we were using. Certainly which hand and how many. This is the kind of capability. And it's just gotten much, much better since then. Okay, now for the finance part of it. The valuation it's a small business compared to the oil industry or banking or aerospace or trucking. This is a tiny industry. The total private company values a little over $500 billion, $520 billion, of which 2/3 is SpaceX. Total private market valuation, less than $500 billion. I use these in less than $500 billion. For a major industry, this is small, okay? So the public company valuations, SpaceX is not public, but the latest round, this perspective. Today, private companies remain under private capital, private equity, venture capital, much longer than in the past, right? Facebook and Google went public when they were worth about $1 billion. So, very early. When Uber went public, it was worth $47 billion. It's now worth, $150 billion. Okay, SpaceX has had 22 private financing rounds. A lot of private financing rounds would be 7. So it's been privately financed. The last round they had in November of last year valued it at $350 billion. This is the biggest, by far the most valuable private company in history. If and when it goes public, and one of these days it will, it may be the first $1 trillion IPO. But it's private. The others, if you look at them, Uber, DoorDash, those are all delivery companies or GPS-based companies that are the big private companies. Total financing, okay, many of us are finance folks in here, myself included. We know, if you look around the world at big capital-intensive technology industries, how are they financed? Vast majority of companies around the world, across time, are financed with internal cash flow, retained earnings. This is the biggest source of capital for all real industries, except space. The second biggest source of capital for all industries is borrowing, corporate bonds, debt, except space. In space companies, none of them are profitable. SpaceX just turned cash flow positive a little bit. So they don't have retained earnings. And if you're trying to borrow, what are your assets? Highly technologically, very bespoke products that are very quickly obsolete. You can't borrow against that. So the space industry is heavily relied on equity financing, of which it's overwhelmingly venture capital financing. So this is a venture capital financed industry. Okay, exiting. This is the largest private equity buyouts. Again, the first one is kind of an outlier. Other than that, that looks kind of impressive. That is tiny compared to oil and gas, or banking, or trucking, or retail. very few leveraged buyouts. You know, there's just no room for debt. It's not a lot of happen. How many mergers? Okay, you have one big one, but that's basically it. After that, you know, this is very small. You don't have a lot of mergers. Now, you have a lot of mergers, but what they are small companies that are started to be acquired or are failing in being acquired. There's been a lot of failure in this business from a financial point of view. In fact, the vast majority of the space companies that have started have in fact failed. IPOs, the first big one, it was Airbus, but space is a very small part of Airbus, and they're probably going to get out. Boeing and Airbus could easily exit the space industry this year. After that, you don't have a single $1 billion IPO. So not a lot of IPOs. What you have had are SPACs. You know, and those of us who study finance, probably our initial reaction to hearing SPAC is to, very bad idea. A bad idea whose time has come. Okay, it came during the pandemic. Where you would, special purpose acquisition vehicles, you basically take a pool of money, an investment company, $200 million, do an IPO of just the investment company, and it's publicly traded, okay? And then it goes looking for an operating company to buy. And if they're successful and you have an acquisition, what have you just done? You've gone public, become a public company without going through the IPO process. Seems like a really good idea. It has not worked anywhere near as well as it seems like in theory. The most prominent one was Virgin Galactic. Went public in 2000, raised $268 million. Problem is, there's a kicker with SPACs. SPAC investors have a redemption option. So you buy this, you know, it's a $10, almost all, or $10. You buy this, and then if there's the merger, you can either keep your shares and get shares in the operating company, or you can redeem your $10. It's been put in an escrow and you earn interest. The vast majority have redeemed. So it turned out that the Virgin Galactic, even though it looked like they raised $260 million, they actually got only $68 million cash out of it. And this has been repeated by many of these SPACs, so they really haven't worked well. But this was a way that space companies, about a dozen major space companies went public. The returns? Well, this is GPS. This is what I had before. GPS companies generated $170 billion on exit. Very successful. This is where the early investors, 700 times return. So GPS has been an unqualified success and will be going forward. Everything else is the bottom there. What's SpaceX? We don't know what SpaceX is. If you're an earlier investor in SpaceX, you're very rich now. Those two exceptions, all the others are the bottom line. The venture capital that were going into space companies since 2020, January 2021, the bottom is the return. The middle ones, one of those in the middle is traditional space, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Airbus, the S&P 500. The one in the bottom is the space. This is where venture capital has gone to die. And yet it still keeps coming back. Tremendous amount of money coming in, even though the historic success has been pretty low. Okay, looking forward, space business over the coming decades. You can make a case that the space economy can be $2.5 trillion in 2035, or much less than that. But this, if you're interested at all in this, and you want to look at one report, this is probably the best one to do. It's from the World Economic Forum and McKinsey. They analyze the space economy today and project what it's going to be in 2035. If you're interested in just, McKinsey, global space economy, and this is what comes up. And we'll walk it through. Now it's $630 billion. The currently commercial 205. Well, you can see there. This projects what's going to happen. The short answer here is it's going to be overwhelmingly what has happened so far. GPS, use of satellites from space, using the data. Some more launch, some more satellites, but it's basically going to be applications, which is technology, right? Think about the internet. This is this ephemeral thing with a tremendous ecosystem built on it. That's what's going to continue to happen. A lot of defense. The bottom line there is going to be defense. And this was before the bust up recently with Europe. So defense spending is probably going to be even higher than it is there. All right, so I'm almost done. Space mining. The idea is absolutely intriguing. There's 15,000 metallic asteroids in near-Earth orbit. By near-Earth orbit, one of them is only 6 years away by spacecraft. That counts as near-Earth orbit. Okay, so several 100,000 asteroids, most of them are just dust and rock and ice. These are metallic, meaning they have a lot of gold, platinum, heavy metals, really valuable stuff, okay? And the idea is, they're there, let's go get it and bring it back, right? So sooner or later, you're going to have space mining. This is for your grandkids. This is not short term. This is the, if you Google space mining and look at this, people get very excited. Tyson, the physicist, said that the first trillionaire will be an asteroid miner. The first trillionaire is probably going to be Elon Musk. Space, but not mining space. This is some of the asteroids that are close to Earth. And this is the theoretical value. That we're going to Psyche 16. Again, six years by space. But if you get there and can figure out a way to mine it, its nominal value, in terms of the gold and platinum and other heavy metals, is 75 times world GDP. So many hundreds of trillions of dollars. Theoretical value. Problem is, how are you going to get there? It's 6 years. Then how are you going to stop? There's no gravity. So you have to have propellant to get down. You get down to the Earth. How do you anchor to an Earth where there's no gravity? So Newton's law, you put something out, pushes back. If you solve that, you then mine an ore, which you then have to somehow refine in space, create the fuel to put different orbit and bring it back to Earth. Anything that can be done, any mineral, gold, or anything else, is far easier to do on Earth. This is an illusion, in my opinion. The space mining will come for metals. In the short term, mining will happen in space. They're looking for water. Water is far more valuable than gold in space for its own use, and you can hydrolyze water into hydrogen and oxygen, you have fuel. So there's going to be space mining, but in the near term, it's going to be for water. Who wants to be a space tourist? I don't, by the way. I mean, this has been kind of everything I've seen about this I don't want to go to Mars either corporally or as ashes in an urn. I have no, but a lot of people do. And space tourists. Right now, you can go out, Blue Origin has gone 11 times. Katy Perry is going, I think today, in a Blue Origin space flight up to 100 kilometers and back down. So she's going to space. We have a lot of people, our current NASA administrator, who will soon be the administrator, Jared Isaacman, just did he's done 2 space flights that he paid for himself with SpaceX. He's had the highest space flight in history, high-low Earth orbit. And so there's been many people who have paid $50 to $100 million to go to the space station or ride on a rocket. But to actually have the merely rich be able to do tourism will happen. I mean, there's no doubt. If you think about what people do now for exotic tourism, it's going to happen. It will be a relatively small part of space, a few tens of billions, but we're going to have space tourism. Okay, they want to call it spaceflight participant. The folks who've done it don't like to be called tourists. They have to train almost as much as an astronaut. They like to be called spaceflight participants. All right. Well, what about research and manufacturing? Think about this. There would be certain things that would be really handy to be able to make in zero gravity, right? Crystals, certain types of pharmaceuticals. If you didn't have, things behave differently when there's no gravity. Water always goes into a sphere. So there are things that can be done in space, at least in the research, that can't be done on Earth. Now, to do this on a large scale, no. It's going to be research in space, but actually manufacturing in the short term is going to be very limited. On the other hand, if we do have a space infrastructure, bases or stations on Mars and the Moon, and we're going there several hundred times a year, yeah, you're going to build out the fuel stations and the repair stations and the stops. There's going to be a whole body of stuff built in space in time, much later. And this is something, the space debris. These are the images that you see. That looks very frightening, right? You have the Earth, and you have 25,000 objects going around the Earth at any time. Many times that, smaller objects, but they're basketball size. And if you think about 200 to 500 miles of space over the entire Earth, this is several trillion square miles of space. So this is a long-term problem. There's only been one collision in space ever. And that was a Russian and US satellite collided with each other, and that happened in 2007, 2009. So this is a potential problem, but and again, the problem is, how do you pay for it? It's a tragedy of the commons. It's in everybody's interest to get rid of the space debris. It's in no individual country's, company's interest to do it, and you have legal issues. Would you really want the Chinese getting rid of our space satellites? And so this could be a problem going forward. I don't see a business model for it now. On the other hand, transporting space cargo. The Starship, this is Starship. I didn't say it, but to even the Artemis 3, which is going to be the first return to space with humans in 2027, 28, it's going to be with Starship. That's going to be what gets people from the station that's circling the moon down to their moon surface. So the Starship will do that. But to get to Starship, to the moon, it's going to get into low Earth orbit and will have to be refueled 14 times to have the fuel to make the one-way trip to the moon. So you're going to have refueling for even the very simplest activities. Over time, this is going to be transporting cargo. Okay. Now, think about this, though. That's Starship. It can go from any point to any other point on Earth in 30 minutes. So if you're a military planner and you could go from California to Korea in 30 minutes, transporting really valuable stuff. Or if you needed to go to an environmental catastrophe or an earthquake, you could get supplies in 30 minutes. So you're going to have Earth-to-Earth transportation using spacecraft could be a very large business indeed. So the military is actually purchasing a dozen of its own starships as well as contracting for others. So these are the kind of the future businesses that have been speculated on. Some of these will work out, some of them will not. So the road ahead, you can plausibly make a case that by 2035, space could be 2.3 trillion or less than 1 trillion. And either way, though, finance is going to be absolutely critical to it. So thank you very much. Any questions? Just out of curiosity, the first time I presented it was in Paris and then China, several times in New York, and then 2 days ago in Kuwait. So that's how I keep track. Questions, please.
So before we ask any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. Without microphones, we won't be able to hear you and the online participants won't be able to hear you. Any questions? Please. Now, normally I get quite a few. So yeah, go ahead, please.
I'll wait for the microphone. Thank you. So for the SpaceX Starlink satellites, is debris a problem there? Or for the 40,000 they have to fit in that lower Earth orbit? Or is that not going to be an issue?
It's going to go in low Earth orbit. They're going to be able to do, I think they can do 27 at a time on one rocket and 35 at a time. And if you've ever seen them, the way they'll do it is they have a Pez dispenser. So you have the satellites, they're flat, they start flat, and they're stacked up, and then they go out into space, they kick them out like a Pez dispenser. And then they have the solar panels that deploy, and they deploy. We saw one time outside our house, and you can see them. They're 8 or 9 pebbles in space. It's a very commonly seen. So this, yeah, there will be deployed. Now, the 42,000, that's how many the FCC has licensed, right? So a question I got in Kuwait was, is this a rogue private space endeavor that, the government should be involved with? Government regulates this at every margin. The FCC has to grant the license to U.S. Telecommunications provider. There's an international telecommunications union that does it for the world. The FAA has to approve every flight. The EPA has to approve the environmental. So it's heavily regulated. It's Kuiper, Amazon's satellite service, has to deploy 6,000 by 2026. That's their license, and they're just now starting. So yeah, this is, it's regulated by the FCC. Other questions? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Bill. Pun intended, it was out of this world.
Thank you.
So, okay, so as costs, you started out telling us that the costs have been decreased
Yes.
quite a bit. I wonder if the same principle can apply for, say, GPS signal or other technologies that can be applied in industries that we know or are more common, so that banks and other financial institutions can easily fund, rather than these very long-term cutting-edge technologies which require private equity, as you pointed out. So thank you very much.
No, excellent question. And this is where I didn't get into it, but the heavy lift launch is going to be SpaceX, Blue Origin, United Launch Alliance, which is Boeing and Northrop. That's pretty much themselves. But at the lower end, you have a whole many dozen, if not hundreds, of companies that are developing smaller rockets to take smaller payloads. SpaceX is 100 metric tons, 1,000 cubic feet, and they can fit. The SpaceX, the James Webb Telescope that I showed first, they had to, it was origami. They had to fold all those mirrors together and then unfold over days in space. They could send the whole thing up in one package in SpaceX. So you have the heavy lift is basically just a handful of companies, SpaceX, ULA, and Blue Origin. But then below that, and particularly at the lower end where you're sending up a few dozen or 100 kilos, that's going to be very active. And that's where a lot of venture capital is going to come in there. And then in the applications, it is a tremendously viable ecosystem, just like every other technology sector that is being innovated on a very rapid scale. And that's where a lot of the capital is coming in. Some of it's going to launch, but most of it's going into the applications and the technology. FinTech, actually FinTech is one of the biggest area of venture capital investment. It's kind of hard to see. I had a conversation earlier, the Bitcoin and other blockchain technologies. I don't use them, but a lot of people do, so it's going to become very important. If you're into technology at all, this is really one of the places where the action is going to be at a level of technology and sophistication that you won't find anywhere else. Other questions, please? Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have two questions.
Okay.
Maybe my question is too big. So because if we look at today's space development after 2,000 years, so it's like the historic human beings activity, right? So if this is the case, what is your own opinion about the social welfare? Human beings' social welfare today to be allocated to this area, because we seldom see, except the GPS, right? Or maybe SpaceX, the internet. All other things, market tell us the index, star index, this sector is really bad. And the only venture capital. So is given today's world, like tariffs, a lot of human beings and things, right? Small things. What is the social welfare and
would it be better to spend $500 billion here on Earth rather than launching stuff into space? Okay.
Yeah.
What's your second question?
Yeah,
I'll try to answer
it's
both.
related to the first one, because I think the very successful one is only GPS, government and military led. So I think in the very beginning, we need this exponential, we need some force like government to drive the research and everything.
Absolutely.
But the most successful thing we see in space competition is in Cold War. Government in competition with another
Okay.
government, right? So Soviet Union. So what's your thought about the government is competition, or as a whole,
All right.
human beings should be
I
collaborating
probably got
together?
carried away and left the impression that this is a completely private game. Absolutely not. Even Elon Musk, at every opportunity, says NASA has been critical and will remain absolutely critical. Now, there's no question about that. So it will be private and public. The overwhelmingly, maybe half of the money for the exploration stuff will be government, the other half's private. But the innovative stuff is all private. And in many ways, the biggest fans of SpaceX, the biggest single fans, are the US government, particularly the military, because they have brought capabilities to reconnaissance and launch that is undreamed of at a lower cost than anything. NASA says that SpaceX can supply the International Space Station at well under half the cost that they could do it themselves. The Space SLS, the Space Launch System that's government run, is 10 years late, many times over budget. Starship has been steadily declining cost. The private part of this is the part that's working, but it's working with government. And government is involved at every step, government regulates it, but would we be going to the moon if we had to pay for it as taxpayers? Not a chance. There's no reason to do it. If you think, why did we go to the moon in 1969? There was no Martians, there was nothing there. We didn't go we went to beat the Russians. Why are we going to the moon now? To beat the Chinese. This is, when you get right down to it, in democratic societies, you do what the electorate wants. Especially when we don't have to pay for it. But your basic point, to get back to the first, would it be better to spend $500 billion here on Earth rather than space? Perhaps. But essentially, isn't that the essence of capitalism? These are private investors. This is what they want to spend their money on. We allow this in every other sector of our economy, is that particularly equity capital, for those of you who are finance, students particularly, equity capital is very special. And it's absolutely essential because you don't have to ask permission. You borrowed money, you have to get a bank to lend it to you. If you have equity capital, you can invest it in whatever you think is valuable, long-term, risky. This is where the innovation has all been on the private side. On time, interacting with government, absolutely. But space, if you take nothing else from it, is now overwhelmingly a private endeavor in cooperation with space, with government, but it's overwhelmingly private. That's where the action is, that's where the money is, that's where the innovation is.
Thank you. I think if there's one final question, we'd have time for it. If not, we have one question. This will have to be our last question, though.
Okay.
Hello, Doctor. So I'm a fan of science fiction fan, and every once in a while there's a Comic-Con that happens here. I had the pleasure of meeting Marina Sirtis from Star Trek.
Wow.
And,
okay.
Yeah, and she was a very nice lady. And I asked her. It's funny because being a technology person myself.
And she said she was the chick on Star Trek, and I was always a fan too. So yeah.
And she was nice enough to volunteer her opinion on space travel. Obviously, it seems ironic that a lot of the cast doesn't believe that we should go up, that we should do what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, and like you were referring to, that we should do what Neil deGrasse Tyson said and focus on Earth rather than trying to go somewhere else. But it is fun and very exciting to think that we're going somewhere else. So you mentioned that this is being driven by private endeavors, right? Or by private enterprise.
Private egos.
Yeah. So when these folks, you mentioned in the distant future, we're going to mine asteroids and we're going to get, they're going to find an amazing amount of
it's
wealth
there.
Right?
The resource is there. We know
Yeah,
that.
it's there. So how will that change things? How will that change the political landscape? Like, for example, you mentioned that that we're the most advanced right now. We're, because of what our companies are doing. How will that change things in the future? You have a view that I don't have. So how will that change things? What will things look like when people or when companies like SpaceX find these resources and mine them and have them and own them, right? Mm-hmm. So what will things look like in your view?
That's a very excellent question. Again, a lot of things go into it. Who will own it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it probably will be, well, almost surely it'll be SpaceX will own it, or the mining, whatever the mining company will own it, or China will own it. China's ahead in terms of going to the moon in many ways. They've done things in exploration, unmanned, but in many ways they're ahead of getting to the moon. And in the military stuff, the Space Force lives in real fear of what's happening with China. So they're going to be there. The other, let me plant a seed for you. Why do we do this? Why do we ever explore?
Yeah, what's the feasibility?
There's something in the human soul that you want to explore whether it makes any sense or not. Let me also plant a seed and ask the question. Do you think that the woman who will be the mother of the first baby born in space is alive today? It will happen, right? That woman, I actually think she is, and she's either American or Chinese. My take, she's probably in high school at least. Everything that happens on Earth is going to happen in space. So far, there's been no murders in space. There's been no sex in space. There's been none of the things that we do here on Earth in space. It will happen. We're heading there, whether we think it's a good idea or not. This is interview. It's good. How will it change? Well, the first thing that came to mind, I grew up where the Soviet Union was, the big bear in the world. It's going to be China. It already is. But even the last week, China, the competition with China is going to intensify, and hopefully, I go to China quite frequently, and I always give the same talk, that China and the US are fated to be competitors, perhaps even rivals. We are not fated to be enemies, and I hope we never are. Think about this. What if you have US and China both have bases, or Artemis and China both have bases on the moon, and one suffers a catastrophe, loses power? You need to have cooperation. You need to have rescue. In the Artemis, one of the things in Artemis is interoperability. You want to make sure that the space capsules can lock. They use the same parameter of fuels, right? So all these things are part of our future. This is now a small part, even as all the press that it gets. It's going to become increasingly important as we go forward.
Small follow-up. Michael Porter from Harvard University said that endeavors like this can succeed if they create shared value, right? What is the shared value that the cooperation between government and private enterprise is creating?
I'm a bit less of an idealist than Mr. Porter. I think that you could you could have industrial success and economic success without necessarily having shared values. For example, right now, who's getting rich? U.S. mostly, overwhelmingly. All developing countries are getting absolutely nothing out of this. One of the reasons the United States never ratified the international law of the sea is because if we did that, any resources mined from the sea, you'd have to pay royalties to developing countries. So the same thing if we had space. So it can go forward even if you don't have complete shared vision, as long as, right, the United States is a democracy. So this has been overwhelmingly supported by democratic processes and in the West. But we're competing with a country that is not a democracy. And this is driving a lot of the technology, particularly on the military and reconnaissance side. And it's driving it at a frenetic pace. So I hope there's shared vision. I hope there's universal world peace. I guess I'm not expecting it to happen, but it could. Excellent questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, I have a goodie.
So thank you very much for coming. We have a globe for you, so you can imagine yourself satelliting around it as you.
I think we're supposed
go
to.
by.
Here, there you go. All right, thanks again for inviting me. It's been fun.
Thank you. So before everyone leaves, we'd like to announce the winners of the student Best Paper Student Awards. But before we do that, I do want to thank everyone who we've needed to make this conference a success. Of course, we want to thank all of the authors of the 94 papers that were included in the conference program and the faculty members who generously donated their time to chair sessions during the conference. We'd also like to thank our keynote speakers, including Dr. Megginson, for their fascinating presentations. The conference couldn't have taken place, though, without the work of many people behind the scenes. I'd like to thank the program committee, Dr. Luis Perez Batras, Dr. Jorge Brusa, Dr. Stephen Chen, Dr. Yong Chen, Dr. Moon Cho,
Cool.
Dr. Noor Al Faisal, Dr. Juan Flores, Mr. Hugo Garcia, Dr. Im, Dr. Balaji Janamachi, Dr. Ned Koch, Dr. Leonello Preto, Dr. Tony Rodriguez, Dr. Haibo Wang, Dr. Constant Yayi, and Dr. An Win Yen and Dr. Rafael Zago, all from TAMIU. We'd like to thank Dr. Mendoza and Dr. Salinas from Watt, Dr. Vasquez and Dr. Medellin from UTTN, and then Dr. Chris Boudreau from Florida Atlantic, Dr. Zachary Cole from Saginaw Valley, and Dr. James Payne from Oklahoma State. In addition to helping us with the program, they also read and assessed the student papers for the best student paper competition. So if you don't win, don't blame me. I don't get to vote on it. I've given you the list of everyone you can go and complain to afterwards. I'd like to thank the staff from the A.R. Sanchez Junior School of Business who contribute their time to manage sessions, help participants with registration, help attendees find their way around virtually and in person, and deal with all the organizational tasks that need to be completed for the conference to take place. So thank you to the program coordinators, Jessica Cavazos and Jasmine Spear. I'd also like to thank Daniela Rangel, Andrea Martinez Dominguez, Amy Acosta Lopez, Samantha Soto, Dana Bravo, Sal Diaz Aguilar, Kiana Cruz, Cindy Martinez, Nadia Larumbe, David Martinez Parra, Jocelyn Ortega, and Adriana Diaz, Miguel Montejano Jr., Maggie Blasco, Amy Rodriguez, Edward Lopez, Erica Perez, Elizabeth Zubadia, Naomi Gutierrez, Manuel Villarreal Jr., and Leo Lozano from the DIBTS faculty, Jacqueline Kelly, who's helped us a lot with driving people around. Finally, I'd like to thank all the excellent students on the Dean's Advisory Council for their hard work, and OIT. Thank you very much for everything you've done for us, broadcasting all the sessions, and event services for their help. Finally, I would be definitely remiss if I didn't thank Amy Palacios, the Associate Director for the Study of the Center for Western Hemispheric Trade. She's taken the lead in organizing the conference and making sure it went through with as few possible problems as possible. So getting people like Dr. Megginson here, that's all her hard work that's done it. But thank you to everybody for that. The next task I have to do is to give the student awards. So every year we have a competition where we give awards and money to the best papers. As I said, the papers are selected by the program committee, so I want to thank them for their work reading and assessing all the papers. In addition to receiving the certificate, which I have here, they'll also receive money and free registration next year for the conference. So we hope that you come back and possibly win again. We award separate prizes for undergraduate and graduate students. If you hear your name and you're here still, please come up to the podium to get your certificate. So our first honorable mention in the category of papers by an undergraduate student goes to Bulbul Zainalova for the role of green loans in promoting corporate sustainability. So if you're here, please come up and get your certificate. We have a second honorable mention in the category of papers by undergraduate students, and this goes to Natalia Esparza for her paper, Understanding Factors in Internal Control Weaknesses. If you're here, please come up. And finally, the award for the best paper by an undergraduate student goes to Martha Rayo for her paper, Mapping the Intellectual Landscape of the International Trade Journal, a bibliometric and topic modeling analysis. So congratulations. And now we'll move on to the PhD students. For papers by PhD students, the honorable mention goes to one of our PhD students from TAMIU, Nana Twum Owasso Pepra, for his paper, Market Competition as a Disciplinary Mechanism, Does It Curb Managerial Myopia in Innovation Investments? And finally, the winner of the best paper by a PhD student goes to another TAMIU student, Ayman Samak, for his paper, Political Risk and Corporate Culture, Evidence from Firm-Level Dynamics. So I want to, once more, congratulations to all the winners and for all the other student participants. All the papers were excellent, and I know that the awards committee had a very, very difficult time finding the best of them. So thank you for coming. I want to take the opportunity to invite everyone to our 30th annual conference, which will be held next year in Laredo. Once again, we plan to have a virtual track for people unable to travel to Laredo and an in-person track for those who can come. So thank you for all your contributions, and we look forward to seeing you again either virtually or in person next year. And with this, I would like to close the 29th annual Western Hemispheric Trade Conference.